We made a real quick little short about scales. This is old school. Scales we used a lot more than other measuring tools because other measuring tools used to be a lot more money and we were trying to conserve them. The way you would do this as far as getting an accurate measurement, you'd come in here and you'd count. Each of these are 10 thousandths of an inch. And if I put on my really good super close range reading glasses, I still need a new prescription. I can't see as good as I used to. But it was really common when you're first as an apprentice, you're starting out, you're learning this stuff. You look at these 10 thousandths marks, and we used to have another one, which I couldn't get when I got this scale. I wanted the one, we used to have ones regularly that were 128ths of an inch because you used fractions. And in fact, on drawings, on some of them, and I'd forgot about that, I had a scale years ago that had 256ths. So if you think about it, a 1/28th of an inch is 7.5 thousandths apart. A 1/256th is 3 1/4-ish. They're pretty close lines. I mean, right there, those were close lines. But the ones we used most of the time because you didn't want to whack your head around using fractions. Fractions were already kind of they weren't being used that much, but I had one that was from an old tool and die maker that had a interruption. Okay, so back to this. So, what I used to do in the days when I could see, and you get your eyes, I can see the marks yet here. What's hard for me is seeing the mark and then with a different color of, in this case, a shiny little gauge block. And obviously, as I was trying to set this up with this gauge block, normally you have chamfered little edges where they've sanded the edges, and I unsanded the edges on one end so that we could put the scale to it and actually get a reasonable looking at it. And what I would do, what they'd have us do in school and what you normally would do is you'd figure on your scale, it's marked in 10 thousandths of an inch, so you can get down to 5 thousandths of an inch just by guessing the middle. And I was working with an older journeyman that he said, you can do better than that, kid. You can get it down to 2 thousandths of an inch. And that was coming from him because he said, just look at those little marks. And he was actually an older guy, so I don't know how his eyes were that good, but he was showing me this and documenting that it worked when we actually measured the pieces. I only got to where I was doing that for a short time. A lot of these skills I talk about, older skills, it's not like this is the way to do it, but it's, remember there's other ways. And if somehow, one of the things this translates over to real simply, while there used to be scales that were 256ths of an inch divisions, all of this idea of looking at this stuff and a little bit of a magnifying glass comes into the idea of an optical comparator, or a digital optical comparator as is used today. It's basically you take a picture of it, you're still using optics, and you just blow it up where it's easier to see where the lines are. And then you can have lines that are even finer on the piece, or multiple gauge blocks of different sizes, and you see between two gauge blocks which one's closer to the size. Anyway, so he convinced me that you could guess within fifths. I really only got good enough to get down to the 2.5 thousandths is kind of where I could guess quarters pretty good in between the lines. But I don't think that saying you can get within a 2 thousandths. Now within a 2 thousandths, I mean as in knowing if it is 2 thousandths or 4 thousandths, not a truly within 0 to 2 thousandths. But you could. I mean, really, if you're getting in the fifths, you could do that. He probably could. I don't know. I don't remember his name. He was my boss at the time. I was 18 years old. He left there. He had been making $6 an hour, and he started making the big bucks. I think he got up to 14, I think, when he moved over to the block plant, Columbia Block. That's where he went to work. A lot of the guys I went to college with went to work at Columbia Machine. Made block machines. They're still in business. I don't know if they make any block machines or not, but they make a lot of machines for packaging. A lot of the machines that package up onto a pallet. You got a lot of things come off your assembly line, your packaging line, and from the small packages, it palletizes them. And last I knew, that's what they were still doing. That was 15 years ago. I don't know. They could be building robots for, who knows? You know, they've moved on. Main reason why we did that, like I say, was saving your other more expensive tools. Now, the reason why I got back into this, and we had a test on our little short too, which one guy got it right so far. It's been out there for a day. Most of the guys failed. We had we talked about the 100,000ths, but we had it pictured with the 64,000th scale side. One guy caught that. Well, all kinds of people were telling us that we didn't know how to use a scale. You couldn't look that close. It was impossible. There was only one guy with the big blown up pictures that noticed that it was actually 64ths of an inch scale instead of the 100. So a bunch of people failed the test. It wasn't an intentional test. It was just, this got flipped over when the picture got taken. Now, what we were doing, we were over here with our slaughter. Everything's been taken down, but we had a very definite depth that we needed for a keyway that was in there. And I don't remember what the depth was, but we had to get it within 20,000ths of an inch, which is not real close when you have 100,000ths marks. But that's why we got this, because there was no way to really get in there and get a good measurement. Oh, it was on the width. It was actually, we needed it closer than that. It was the width. I don't remember now. I don't remember. Something, I know it was with this cutter. The cutter width we can measure, but we had to step over. I don't remember. Somehow getting in there, and that's one of those things, you know, and let's say that we were a more modern shop. Let's say that we had an optical comparator here, which is not all that modern. You can buy surplus optical comparators pretty cheap. Now, if we had an optical comparator instead of taking our scale and a magnifying glass like we were doing here, and honestly, I really don't remember which we needed to measure, how close it needed to be. That 20,000ths was something that made sense to me, but I don't know that that's the truth of what we were doing with this scale. Trying to full disclosure here. But the problem with doing a thing like this with an optical comparator, you need to remove the part. And our whole thing was we need to know the size while we're in position, moving and measuring, making it deeper, making it wider, whatever we were doing. And you can't bring your part to your optical comparator. If we had a coordinate measuring machine, a real nice, you know, again, it usually has to come out. Now, some of the coordinate measuring machines are pretty cool that way. And there's some of them I would not mind having at all. It's a pretty neat tool, but you know, it's $100,000 for the one I'd like to have. And it would come over here right next to the milling machine, and we could just measure all the details of where we're at, either with the contact ones or some of the laser ones. Get a good accurate before you even do more machining. But it's not practical for the dollar value of what we're working with. $100,000 machine to do a better job on a $600 part doesn't really make sense. Anyway, I hadn't needed a scale for a long time, and we looked it up, bought a couple of them. Austin likes them. He's been using them. He's got much better eyes these days than I do. Oh, brings to mind another thing with eyes that I do not have a chance of doing now. And the older, he was probably 50-ish at the time. I was 20. I think I was 20 when he had me doing this. And we did a lot of shaft straightening. And he was explaining to me, take the shaft, just look down the length of the shaft and turn it. And how much you think it's off. And you can't really, when you get good at it, and I do this on 20-foot long shafts to a point, but 10-foot long I do real good at, where you could actually look at it and you could estimate if it's running out when you rotate it 40 thousandths or 10. And you can get real good, and then you come back and you can see where that bump is. What at least I couldn't do was I could get the perception of rotating it and see how much it would run out, and I could get the position if somebody else had their finger on it. So I could, from the depth, see where that bump was, but I'd always have to have a second person helping me pick out how far along the shaft the runout I was looking at. I could see down the length of the shaft, and older people just are not going to be able to do that. You have a lens in your eye. A friend of mine that did, he's multiple doctorates in optics, and anyway, he told me it's a chrysalis lens is what he called it. I don't know if that's right or not. That's secondhand information. Anyway, it's lens in your eye that as you get older gets hard, and you can't accommodate the different close, far. You know, and my initial idea before we started in with that was just lining up fence posts on the farm with Dad, which is the general, you have a post out here, you are here, and the one in between, you keep looking at the far one, and when does this come in the right position? So that gets you into the idea of looking long distance and lining things up. And you can do it with glasses. I wore glasses in those days. I've worn glasses most of my life, but they were single vision. And the thing was, if your eye gets trained, your eye can look out, look back, it can focus at different lengths, and as it moves, your brain knows the amount it's moving, and it is amazing what you can train yourself to do. I thought he was wacky when he started telling me I'd be able to do this with practice. I really thought he was wacky, and here's the guy telling me you can do this, it works, and he says he can't do it, but you will be able to, and I'm like, you're crazy. I got really good at it for a while. It is something a young person can learn to do. But when you get to where you need bifocals, forget it. Because the bifocals, your mind, when you go through a different lens, does not take that into consideration. And your glasses are moving. You can take it into consideration to be able to see the two parts, but you can't position them to where they're the same. When it is all your eyeball positioning from here, looking way out there, your mind will know that straight line after you've trained it. And so it's one of those old things. We used to do a lot of straightening, and it was handy being able to do that. But it's not something I can do now. And I would set up a very elaborate fixture if I was going to do that stuff much today. I don't think I would really rely on trying to teach somebody to do it at this point. Well, we might, we might do a little bit of that if we had short occasion for it, but if I was going to do much, I would set up a fixture. And we did have some fixtures for certain shafts and things with V's and things that we did repeat work on. So anyway, accuracy with your eyes. That's what we were talking about for this little section. And you don't have eyes in the back of your head. Is that right, Kobuk? No eyes in the back of his head.